The wind screamed through the frozen pines like a living thing, sharp and relentless, cutting at her skin and biting at her lungs. She stumbled over roots slick with ice, each step sending shards of snow scattering, and her breath came in ragged, desperate gasps that felt too loud in the empty night. Somewhere in the shadows, eyes gleamed, too intelligent to be ordinary wolves, too close to be imagination. She could feel them, circling, patient, waiting for the moment she faltered. Her pulse thundered like a drum beneath her ribs, burning too hot for the cold that gnawed at her fingers. Blood seeped through her sleeve, warm and sticky, mixing with the snow, and the silver light in her palm flared for a heartbeat, wild and fierce, before flickering out like it had never been there. She swallowed back a scream, and her mind screaming louder, "I can't run forever. I can't control it. But I have to try." Every muscle ached, every step felt like dragging herself through ice, but she couldn't stop. Not now, not ever. The storm seemed alive, twisting, confusing, shrouding her path in fog and snow that blinded more than her eyes. Every shadow was a threat, every sound a predator. And yet, beneath the fear, beneath the raw, screaming panic, there was a spark she couldn't deny, a fierce pulse of power that throbbed in her veins, ancient and untamed. It was terrifying, yes, but it was hers, and if she could survive the night, she might learn to wield it. The thought barely had time to form before another shadow moved, faster, closer, and her heart nearly stopped. She pressed herself against the jagged cliff, shivering, every sense screaming danger, but the spark of hope remained, fragile and stubborn. If you crave stories of danger, destiny, and forbidden love, subscribe now to Wild Moon Narratives, where the moon always tells the truth. From the chaos of snow and wind, a figure materialized, massive, impossibly still, as though the storm itself had parted for him. He moved with a calm that made the trees lean closer, made the shadows hesitate. The snow whipped around his shoulders, but he seemed untouched by panic, untouched by fear. He was the eye of a hurricane, and every instinct in her screamed at her to both flee and fall to her knees. Then his eyes caught hers. Golden, sharp, knowing. Recognition sparked in them, a flicker of something ancient, something that had waited for this moment. He spoke her name, low, rough, and impossible, her name. She had never said it aloud. She hadn't whispered it to anyone. And yet, here it was, curling around her ears like a memory she didn't know she had. The wolves surrounding them froze, tense but obedient, circling in a silent ballet he controlled without motion, without command. Each predator backed down as his gaze swept over them, and for the first time that night, she realized she was not entirely alone, not entirely exposed. He did not reach for her, did not touch her, but he stepped close enough to shield her, his stance taut, protective, ready to strike before the storm, or the creatures within it, could reach her. His voice cut through the howl of wind and teeth, rough and restrained. "You shouldn't be here." The words were warning, judgment, and something else she couldn't name. A thread of care buried beneath layers of self-control, and she wanted to hate him, she wanted to flee. And yet, her fear tangled with something sharper, something thrilling, an unbidden attraction, an unspoken trust that burned hotter than the snow biting her skin. Every second stretched, heavy and electric, as if the world had narrowed to the space between their eyes, between the silence and the storm, between fear and the dangerous pull of him. She felt the storm inside her flare in response, not extinguished, not tamed, but acknowledged, mirroring the power in him, the control he radiated, and the promise that she might survive, if only she let herself. The storm behind her faded into memory, replaced by a memory sharper than any claw. Her first shift. She had trembled with hope, heart pounding, thinking tonight might finally feel like home, but hope had burned too brightly. Silver flame had erupted from her skin instead of fur, wrapping her in fire that seared her arms and face, turning the excitement of transformation into horror. The pack had recoiled as though she were a monster. Elders whispered behind their hands, the word abomination cutting through the air like a blade. She had been exiled before the bond ceremony, cast out into a world too cold to hold her. Alone, with no one to teach her, no one to guide her, she had learned the art of suppression, the careful holding back of fire and power, the long nights convincing herself that control was safety. Every heartbeat reminded her of what she could destroy if she let herself flare. Every breath was a promise she made to the shadows that surrounded her. Back in the present, she flinched as he extended a hand, a simple offering of water. The gesture should have been innocent, but she had learned to expect punishment, rejection, the sharp sting of judgment. Her body tensed, ready to flee or fight. She didn't look at him, she barely breathed. And yet, he waited. He didn't recoil, didn't judge, didn't command. He simply watched, calm and unshakable, as if he had known fire could be dangerous and still recognized the soul that wielded it. His presence pressed against the chaos in her veins, not to contain it, but to soothe it, to tell her, without words, that she could exist without being torn apart. Her thoughts spun. Can I trust him? Or will he be like them? Will he see me as a weapon, a threat, a mistake? But beneath the fear, a fragile glimmer of belonging stirred, warm and fleeting, like the first tentative light of dawn after a night that had never seemed to end. She didn't reach for it, not yet, but for the first time, she imagined that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to face the fire alone. They arrived at the shrine as the moon broke through the clouds, spilling silver across twisted roots and scattered bones, the air thick with age, memory, and unspoken power. Each step crunched over the frost-hardened earth, and she could feel it, something ancient pulsing beneath her feet, like the heartbeat of the world itself. Her chest tightened, lungs burning, and she hesitated at the threshold, sensing that crossing into this sacred space would change everything. As she stepped inside the circle, the symbols carved into stone and bone began to glow faintly, soft lines of light tracing themselves in patterns she didn't understand but felt deep in her chest. The Alpha stiffened beside her, and golden eyes narrowing, attention coiling around his shoulders like a silent warning. Recognition flashed in him, unspoken yet impossible to ignore. Memories surged in her mind, a whisper carried in the wind. The one with the mark. Her pulse spiked, and instinctively, her wrist flared with silver flame, crawling across her skin like molten liquid until a sigil formed, sharp and precise, a language older than any she'd known. Vision struck suddenly, wolves bowing to her presence, their fur glistening under moon's bleeding light that hung impossibly low in the sky. The air thickened, pressing down with the weight of prophecy, the echo of something that had waited centuries for her awakening. A voice, almost hers and almost someone else's, whispered through the shadows, "A king without an heir, the pack will fracture." She froze, on staring at the sigil, doubting her worth, feeling the cold pull of fear tug at her spine. How could she, broken and hunted, carry such a burden? How could she survive when the weight of so many lives rested, trembling, on her shoulders? The Alpha's voice cut through the silence, low and steady, grounding. "Or they were wrong to cast you out." It was soft, almost private, but it ignited a flicker of something she hadn't dared to feel in years. A fragile hope that maybe destiny had chosen the right soul, even if the world hadn't. And for the first time, she imagined a path forward, not as an exile, not as a weapon, but as something more. Someone meant to rise, even against the doubts, even against the prophecy. The forest trembled with the beat of distant drums, a rhythm that sank into her chest like a warning heartbeat she couldn't escape. Shadows twisted unnaturally among the trees, shapes that weren't entirely wolf, snarling and shimmering in the silver light of the moon. She froze, heart hammering, as voices rose in accusation, sharp as the claws of those who had hunted her all her life. Witch, curse, moonblight. The words struck her like blades, sharp and relentless, cutting into the fragile hope she had begun to cradle in the shrine's glow. Through the chaos, the rival Alpha stepped into view, taller, broader, radiating authority and malice all at once. His voice rang out over the forest, demanding her surrender, as if she were a prize to be claimed or a weapon to be destroyed. Around him, shadow beasts stirred, twisting in forms she could barely comprehend, each movement echoing with the promise of pain. The council's voices rose as well, sharp and cold, and warning the Alpha beside her, choose your people, choose them, or lose everything. She felt it then, a knot of fear and determination twisting in her stomach. Her body shifted instinctively backward, ready to flee, ready to disappear into the cold night that had always been her refuge. But every step away from him tore at her chest, a silent fracture of what had begun between them. The spark that had glimmered in the cave, that soft pull beneath the firelight, now threatened to snap under the weight of duty, fear, and fury. He hesitated, golden eyes locking with hers, the weight of loyalty pressing down as he measured his next move. But hesitation in a storm like this was a weapon aimed directly at her. The moment stretched too long. Before he could act, before he could claim her or shield her, she was gone, slipping through the trees like smoke, leaving only the echo of her silver flame and a whisper of betrayal in her wake. The drums pounded harder, the prophecy clawed at the edges of the night, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. The pack was fracturing, shadows were closing in, and the fragile connection between them, the trust, the desire, the unspoken promise, was now stretched thin, threatened by forces neither of them could fully control. The world had struck first, and the war for her, for them, had only the cave smelled of smoke and molten stone, a warmth that pressed against her chilled bones like a whisper of safety. She huddled in the shadow of jagged rock, the wound along her side burning with every heartbeat, every ragged breath. Her fingers traced the silver scar along her wrist, the faint echo of flame that never fully left her, and she let out a shuddering exhale, half fear, half relief, when he stepped into the lava-lit cave. The firelight caught his golden eyes, and for a moment the world narrowed until it was only him and the fragile rhythm of her pulse. He knelt before her without a word, hands gentle, careful, a tension in his shoulders that spoke of battles fought and losses counted. The wound stung under his touch, but she didn't flinch. Something about the way he moved, the way he respected the distance between them, yet closed it in the smallest ways, made her chest ache with a strange, unnameable hope. "You shouldn't have come," she murmured, voice rough, almost swallowed by the roar of the distant storm outside. But he only shook his head, eyes softening. "I couldn't leave you out here," he said, and voice low, roughened by regret and restraint. He told her then, in that intimate, trembling space, of the mate he lost, the cost of ruling a pack that demanded strength and obedience above everything else. His words hung between them like smoke, heavy, scented with pain. She let herself breathe, finally, and whispered her own truth, her power fed on emotions, fear and hope and love entwined, raw and dangerous. He didn't recoil, he didn't judge, he listened. Their eyes met, charged and electric. She felt it, the pull of something inevitable, the weight of unspoken longing pressing against her ribs. They leaned in, breaths mingling, almost crossing that final line. Then he murmured, voice rough but tender, "I see you, all of you." Her heart stuttered, and for the first time in a long while, she let herself believe she could trust. Not completely, not yet, but enough to know that even if the next storm tore them apart, the bond between them had been forged in fire, pain, and unflinching recognition. The moon hung high, pale and accusing, as the council gathered, their faces masks of judgment in the flickering torchlight. She stepped forward, heart pounding, and felt the weight of 1,000 eyes drilling into her chest. Whispers curled through the air, soft and venomous, until they became a chorus of accusation. Abomination, Witch, destroyer. Her pulse slammed in her ears, and every instinct screamed to run, but she couldn't move. Then the elder she had trusted, the one who had once nodded at her in fleeting approval, stood and pointed, voice ringing through the sacred hall like iron on stone. This is the one, the marked one. Her power cannot be contained. She will destroy us all. His words were a blade, slicing hope from her chest, twisting it into fear and disbelief. The council stepped forward, their hands raised in binding, their eyes cold with authority. He moved too, the Alpha, stepping between her and the condemners, his chest heaving. But the council's decree held him fast. His golden eyes met hers, a silent plea, a promise he could not keep. She wanted to run to him, to collapse into his strength, but he was restrained, powerless against their collective judgment. A surge of heat rose from her chest, silver fire crawling along her arms, spreading in violent, uncontrollable arcs. It licked her fingers, coiling around her wrist like serpents of light. She screamed, a raw, aching sound that split the night, and the air trembled with the weight of her power. Wolves recoiled, council members shouted, and the Alpha's shouts were lost in the roaring inferno she had become. And then, just as suddenly, she vanished, into shadow, into wind, into freedom. The last thing she felt was his gaze, burning with frustration, longing, and a helpless love that would haunt her for eternity. Alone in the night, her chest heaving, she whispered to the darkness, silver sparks scattering around her. They will pay. They will know the fire they tried to cage. I will not be their sacrifice. Not now, not ever. In that moment, the girl they had feared became something more, something unstoppable, burning with betrayal and a vow that would shake the foundations of pack and prophecy alike. The night was fractured, the ritual site crumbling under the assault of shadow beasts. Wolves cried out, falling into the chaos. He saw the air thick with smoke and ash. He was trapped, his strength pinned by the enemy, golden eyes frantic as he struggled against bonds he could not break. And yet, the forest held its breath, waiting for her. She emerged from the darkness, every step measured, unwavering. The snow beneath her feet crackled with energy, and the moon above split the clouds, casting a silver glow that seemed to recognize her as its own. She didn't run, she didn't falter. She was no longer the hunted girl, no longer the exile. She was the storm, and the storm had come for them all. Silver flame surged across her form, coiling like living fire, illuminating every scar, every doubt, every flicker of fear that had ever tried to claim her. The ancestors' voices rose inside her, a chorus of roaring wolves, each syllable reverberating through her bones, on through the earth itself. Her voice joined them, low and commanding, and the ground answered, splitting with jagged cracks that spilled molten light into the night. Ancient ruins trembled, long-forgotten symbols igniting, as if recognizing the rightful heir to power that had slept too long. The shadow beasts recoiled, their snarls twisting into confusion, terror, as she stepped forward. Every hair on her body stood on end, her pulse a drum of defiance. Across the battlefield, the true villain revealed itself, a darkness older than memory, eyes burning with disdain. And still, she advanced, fire in her veins, silver light dancing along her claws, every heartbeat a declaration, I am not your sacrifice. The Alpha, freed at last by the shift of her power, watched from the rubble, awe and love tangled in his gaze. The wolves rallied at her call, but it was she who led them now, unshaken, untamed. She was the culmination of prophecy, the embodiment of wrath and mercy entwined. The night itself seemed to bend around her, a cinematic panorama of power, fury, and destiny finally claimed. No longer running, no longer hiding. She had transformed. She was unstoppable. She stood alone at the heart of the devastation, silver flame still dancing across her skin, every shadow retreating from the power she had claimed. Around her, the forest groaned, broken branches scraping the sky, snow melting into steaming rivulets, and the fallen wolves of her pack beginning to stir, wary, eyes wide with awe and confusion. The moon hung low, fractured by storm clouds, reflecting the turmoil of a world poised between ruin and rebirth. Her chest heaved, and not from exhaustion, but from the weight of choice, the enormity of every life teetering on the edge of her will. Her hands trembled as she looked to the Alpha, golden eyes pleading, tethered to her in ways she hadn't understood until this moment. Every instinct screamed to flee, to hide, to burn everything down rather than trust anyone again. But her heart, the stubborn, defiant human heart, beat for something more. The shadows of the enemy recoiled, not gone, just held at bay. And in that pause, that fragile heartbeat between destruction and salvation, a question hung in the air like the sharp scent of ozone. Would you have chosen her, or feared her too? The whisper wasn't just for the wolves, or the Alpha, or the creatures lurking in the edges of her vision. It was for anyone who had ever faced the impossible, or anyone who had ever felt fire in their veins too wild to control. Is she a hero, or a girl cursed with too much fire? Her gaze lifted, unwavering, toward the fractured moon. The wind carried the scent of ash, of blood, of life yet to be claimed. And in that wind, a promise lingered, fierce and dangerous. Her story was not over. She was fire and fury, loss and hope, boundless and unbroken. The ash settled slowly, drifting like grey snow over the torn forest floor, blanketing broken branches and the lingering scent of fire and blood. The storm had passed, but its echoes lingered, a low hum vibrating through the earth, a reminder that nothing, no wound, no fire, no betrayal, ever truly vanished. The forest was silent but not peaceful. Every shadow seemed to twitch with a memory of what had just happened, and every gust of wind whispering promises of vengeance and reckoning. She stood there, chest heaving, silver flame reduced to a faint glow along her veins, every heartbeat loud enough to drown out the rustle of the dying storm. Her eyes searched the jagged horizon, and for the first time in so long, she felt the fragile stirrings of relief, but it was tempered with caution, a knife-edged awareness that survival was never permanent. The Alpha reached toward her, slow, deliberate, uncertainty etched into every line of his body. His fingers hovered near hers, hesitating as if afraid the connection might shatter or burn him alive. Their eyes met, the fire of the battle behind them mirrored in the depths of his golden gaze, and for a heartbeat, it was only them, breath mingling, hearts aching, and hope dangling like a thread over the precipice of chaos. But beneath their feet, the earth trembled again, subtle at first, then insistent, like a warning from the bones of the world itself. Somewhere, far beneath the roots and rock, something moved, ancient and patient, aware. A voice slithered through the shadows, barely more than a breath, yet sharp enough to pierce the soul. She is not the only one. The moon flickered overhead, silver light spilling over distant peaks, illuminating shapes that promised danger, power, and secrets yet untold. A chill ran through the air, carrying the scent of storms to come, and the knowledge that the story, the fight, the fire, had only just begun. And then, darkness claimed everything. The screen, or the vision, cut to black, leaving the pulse of suspense echoing in the silence, and the promise of a sequel burning brighter than any flame. In the aftermath of fire and shadow, the forest finally breathed again, though its scars remained, a testament to battles fought and powers awakened. She stood at the edge of the clearing, silver flame fading into the soft glow of the moon, a queen not yet crowned but already unstoppable. The prophecy that once weighed so heavily on her shoulders had shifted, no longer a chain of fear, but a spark of destiny she could shape with her own hands. The Alpha emerged from the shadows, weary but unwavering. His eyes, golden and steady, met hers with unspoken understanding. No words were needed. In that shared silence, They acknowledged the truth they had both learned. Strength alone could not protect the pack, nor could control alone define them. Trust, courage, awe, and the fire within were what would carry them forward. Around them, the pack, fractured and uncertain, watched from a distance. Fear still lingered, but awe had replaced it, and a cautious hope began to weave its way through the ranks. She was no longer the outcast, the abomination whispered about in hushed tones. She was the one who had claimed her power, faced betrayal, and stood unbroken in the eye of destiny. Yet, even as the forest fell silent, the tremor beneath the earth reminded them that their story was far from over. New threats waited, and old fears lingered like shadows at dusk. But for this moment, they were alive, together, and ready to face whatever came next. And in the stillness, with the moon watching over them, the future shimmered with possibility. A world rebuilt, a love forged in fire, and a heroine who would never again be silenced.